I think the number one responsibility of a private investigator is to keep their client updated. Hi, I'm Mr. PI.
And I'm Mrs. PI.
And if you're new here, we help new and struggling private investigators and process servers grow their businesses to $100,000 or more in 12 months or less.
With a combined 30 years of experience, we know what to do and what not to do.
So follow us to take the guesswork out of running your PI and process service business. Hey, we want to welcome you to our first ever Q&A episode. That's where you submit the questions and we give you the answers based on our 30 plus years of private investigation and process service experience. All right, let's get started. So question number one, this one comes from one of our YouTube viewers. They want to know, as a new private investigator, how should you structure your pricing? Should you go flat rate or should you go hourly?
Good question. We have found that the easiest way to price our services is flat rate packaging. And the reason is because you don't have to keep up with all the math. It's a lot easier to build all of your pricing into one flat rate package.
Mm-hmm. And I think that this is the less popular route that private investigators would take for pricing their packages. And I think the reason why it's the less popular option is because most people just don't understand how to structure a flat rate package so that it's beneficial to the client while also being beneficial to your bottom line.
Right. I think a lot of times other investigators think of it as, we are leaving so much on the table. You're not accounting for XYZ. Well, you have in flat rate pricing. You just have to think about it on the front end a little bit more than if you were to do it by the hour.
Okay. So typically on an hourly pricing structure, you'll have your hourly rate, which will be X amount of dollars per hour for the investigation time. You'll build in some expenses, so you'll have a popular expense that private investigators charge for is mileage. There may be some additional administration time that's added into it. So, you may have one rate for investigation and one rate for administrative. In flat rate, you can still accommodate for those things. You would just build it into a single price that you can quote to your client. So I think one of the most important parts of developing a flat rate package is to make sure that the package has parameters. So what are some parameters that you would account for if you were developing a flat rate package?
Well, I think you've listed a few already. A good rule of thumb is you need to account for admin time. You need to account for, there could be a certain mileage that you have to account for. Not all of your cases are going to be local. I mean, you might have some drive time. So you want to price your packages. It might look more expensive on the total number, but you have to account for those things. So I think admin time is good, and mileage is also a big one that you need to take into account for.
So when you're developing a package, what you'll do is, using some experience, and if you're new, you probably don't have a lot, so you may have to wing it at first and change your package as you go. But what you'll do is you'll take, for example, like a run-of-the-mill domestic case or a run-of-the-mill child custody case. You'll figure out how many hours that your clients will typically pay for, and that's either how many hours that it takes to solve the case or how many hours that somebody's willing to invest to get the case solved. You'll take those hours, then you'll determine, out of all of the surveillance hours, how many hours are administrative. So for example, you may find that for every 4 hours of surveillance, you have 1 hour of administrative time. So you'll obviously document that when you're developing your package. And then you'll also come up with an average of mileage. So, for every 20 hours of surveillance, you may drive X amount of miles. what I would do if it were me and I were starting today, I would come up with what I thought the average was, and I would develop a package which included all of those things. So my package would include, for example, 20 hours of surveillance, 4 hours of administration, and let's just say 200 miles. And that would be a base package that I could sell. And the key to selling the package is to make sure that you've got all these things outlined. You don't want to say, I will work your child custody case for $2,000. You would want to say, for $2,000, I will give you up to 20 hours of surveillance. I will give you 4 hours of administrative time, and I will give you 200 miles. And then you'll have some overage, or you'll have a larger package in which you can then upgrade or increase, the order total from one package to the other.
Correct. And that's a good rule of thumb. And not all cases are going to be exactly the same, but and a good average is where you should start to start pricing your packaging.
Mm-hmm. And I think that pricing your packages, and I would have more than one, so pricing your packages appropriately, having it all inclusive, I think will help you during the discovery call, selling the package. Because here's the thing. If somebody Googles private investigator for child custody, for example, they're going to get 10 phone numbers. They'll call 9 of those people, and those people are going to say, yeah, we do child custody at $70 an hour, it's 50 cents a mile, etc. And then
it's
when
the add-ons, it's the add-ons that the run-of-the-mill private investigators will, but for 50 cents a mile or whatever, they'll add all these on. But you could be a little bit different and have it all included.
Yeah, so then when they talk to you, it's going to be a different conversation. You're going to say, hey, this is a flat rate. And the way you sell it is, hey, if I was charging you an hourly rate and a mileage rate and I had all these additional expenses, there's no way for me to tell you what your total cost is going to be. So you can't keep up with your budget. Heck, I can't keep up with your budget doing it that way.
That's just frustrating. That's just frustrating for us. It's frustrating for them, having to keep up with all of those totals, those running totals. But if you can come up with an average, again, with each pricing structure, different packaging, then it's beneficial to us as an investigator and beneficial to the client as well.
And it provides a better experience, because at the end of the case, they've already spent the money that they were going to spend, and they're not going to have a surprise bill. So it leaves a better taste in their mouth. And honestly, it makes things easier for you. So, some of the language that you'll use, and I harp on this regularly when I'm talking about pricing, is you'll say you get up to X amount of hours, up to X amount of miles. That way there's no refund on the tail end. So if it takes 18 hours to complete a job and you've charged them for a 20-hour package, those 2 hours basically are additional revenue in your pocket. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're developing the package. You'll want to use the verbiage up to X amount of whatever we're talking about. So that's my opinion. I think it's better for the investigator to keep up with the bill. It's better for the client. You take the full payment in advance. You're already paid. When the case is over, when you hit those stop limits, there's nothing at the tail end that you have to factor in. There's nothing that they're going to get hit with as far as a surprise bill goes, and everybody's going to be happy at the end. So my opinion is flat rate. Now, if you decide to charge hourly, it's not wrong, but just keep in mind everybody else is going to do it too, so you're going to have to find some other way to stand out in the crowd.
Yeah, absolutely. So question number 2 is, how often should you be communicating with your client throughout the investigation?
That's a great question. You should communicate with your client as much as possible. I think the number one responsibility of a private investigator is to keep their client updated. Now, you may say, wait a minute, isn't the number one responsibility of a private investigator to complete the investigation, to provide results? Yes, that's important, but unless you're communicating with your client regularly, the client's perception is going to be that you're not doing anything on their case. So when I say that you should communicate with them as much as possible, I recommend using some automated tools to keep your client updated without it taking a whole lot of time out of your day. What are some other ways that you could structure communication to where it's not a burden on you as the investigator?
So we are a little bit different than other private investigators, which I know we've mentioned before, but our cases are structured the same. And what I mean by that is we have pre-investigation planning calls, work in progress calls, and I'll explain that. But our clients know throughout the investigation that we are going to communicate with them. So we start with every case with a pre-investigation planning call, which you've touched on briefly a moment ago. We sit down on the phone usually, or via Zoom. Rarely do we sit down with them in person, but we get them in the same room, so to speak, and get all the important information so that we can start the investigation. So that is what we call the pre-investigation planning call. All of our cases start the same. We can't effectively run the investigation without getting some very critical, important pieces of information from the client. And mentioned the work in progress calls. So he gave an example earlier. We have the pre-investigation planning call. We work surveillance a couple of days, and then we have what we call a work in progress call. And the work in progress call is simply we get on the phone, video chat, and we let the client know, hey, this is what we've discovered. Talk about other plans if what you're currently working is not working. But you get on the phone with the client and you tell them everything that you've learned, and that is what we call the work in progress call. And every single case that we touch has a work in progress call, depending on how long you work the case, your engagement time, whatever. You might have one work in progress call, you might have two, but our clients know that every couple of days we're going to get in touch with them.
So, and in between, there are other ways that you can keep your client updated. So if you're using a case management system, giving your client access to the case management system so that they can read the case notes or the case reports, look at the case video. That's kind of a self-service option that you could give to your clients. Takes no time out of your day. The clients can see that the case is progressing appropriately and they're happy. You could also set up automated emails or automated text messages depending on what types of software that you invest in. If you've got a customer relationship manager or a CRM, you could set up a trickle campaign to where every so many days your client receives an email that simply says, hey, we're working your case. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, reply to the email. Here's a phone number you can text a question to. Don't forget, you can manage your case online at our case management system. Give a link to that. And that way it keeps the client engaged as the case progresses, especially if the case hits a period of time that we call idle, where there's not much going on. You still want to keep your client engaged. If the client's engaged with the case, then the client thinks that the case is being worked, the case is progressing. The client may add additional revenue at the end by adding additional hours. And most importantly, the client feels important, they feel heard, they feel taken care of, and they know that you're engaged. So, just because I say communicate with your client every day doesn't mean that you have to personally do it. Lots of tools out there to kind of help you manage the case without it being a drain on your time.
Absolutely. And if you have any questions that you want answered, just leave them in the comments below.
Yeah, and don't forget, if you'd like some of our free resources for process servers, we're going to leave links for those in the description. And until next time,
you can trust, but you better verify.
Bye.